It was a beautiful warm weather outside. On this day, a young guy and a girl were finally able to go on a date. They enjoyed every minute spent together, ate ice cream and talked about the future. They couldn't go out on a date for a long time because they were both studying and had to take tests at the end of every month. And you need to prepare well for them to get a satisfactory grade. But their wonderful day was decided to be ruined by a truck driver who couldn't handle the controls. People around began to panic and tried to save themselves from possible consequences. As a result, the truck flew onto the sidewalk where there were many people and children. Thanks to his reaction, the guy managed to save the girl from a collision with a car. He pushed her away from the dangerous area. But he did not have time to run away and a truck flew towards him. He had no choice but to wait for a collision and death. The boy closed his eyes and tried to think only of good moments from his life before his death. But after a moment he opened his eyes and did not understand what happened. He was hit by a truck, but he is alive. The boy could not speak and his neck was numb. He thought that the afterlife had begun. He was lying on the ground and could not move. His limbs could not be felt. He thought that he would remain like this forever. It was impossible to just lie like that. The boy raised his head due to pain, but the picture he saw did not satisfy him and it was not what he expected. Around him lay many people who were completely burned. He began to think that it was a dream. But it was very cruel for sleep. Houses and other buildings were also burning around. While the boy was trying to figure out what happened to the nose and how he got here, a living person approached him. It was an elderly Chinese man who noticed that the boy was the only survivor. Although he spoke in Chinese, the boy still understood him very well. The man said that surely what happened is called fate. In his eyes, the boy turned into a tiny child who had recently been born. He realized that he looked like a child, but no one could explain to him how it happened. The Chinese man held the boy in his arms while everything around him was on fire and the remains of houses burned down. He was sure that this boy would be different from other residents of their city. The man was running somewhere and talking to the child. He continued to be a crybaby even at the age of 5. The boy understood everything that was happening in front of him. Before him was an unusual grandfather. He grabbed the child very tightly and ran in an unknown direction. In front of them was a high cliff and behind it were mountains. The boy could not believe that the men would jump down, because they would both crash. But the men cold-bloodedly continued to move and jumped off the cliff. Below them was a waterfall, which they flew over. And as a result, the men landed very gently and none of them were hurt. He looked in the boy's eyes like a superhero who can conquer all natural elements. He didn't even cry and the Chinese was surprised how calm this kid was. He touched it and promised that soon they will reach their goal. It is necessary to wait a little more. When he touched the child, something strange began to happen. Some energy began to emanate from the man and seemed to be transferred to the boy. This force was so powerful that it began to melt the snow on the trees nearby. The boy began to guess what was happening between them. His hand was a conductor of energy between the bodies. He remembered reading about it in martial arts books. He wanted to sleep very badly. And so, after a deep sleep, the baby began to wake up. They reached some building that was incomprehensible to the boy. He could only wait to see what would happen next. He slept almost the entire time they got here. He could not even imagine that there were such large buildings in the mountains. They were met by Sabiko's students. One of the students asked how the trip went and if everything was in order. They bowed to the teacher and did not raise their heads until he gave permission. The men replied that everything went fine. Then he asked if anything had happened during his absence. The students said that nothing had happened, so there was nothing to say to them. The teacher thought that nothing could be better than this. He did not bring any news, but he urgently needed to meet with the master. They noticed the child in his arms and asked what would happen to him next. He replied that Chun would take care of him. The students thought that the teacher took him away on purpose. But he immediately beat all guesses and said that he found the baby completely by accident. After talking with the students, the men went to the building to see the master. He began to tell the kid where he ended up. It was the Jangnam clan. He was one of the 9 strongest clans, but unfortunately that time has passed. The boy turned back and saw how the students were practicing different strokes. They practiced martial arts and showed different fighting styles. The little boy liked it very much and watched it with delight. The men laughed, because when the boy watched the students his gaze was very knowing. He looked at him and praised him. In him he saw the continuation of their clan. Then the teacher took the boy and they went to explore other places. They approached another building nearby. The teacher came to her and began to show the child everything that was around them. It was a library. There they met a guy who was constantly running between the rows and serving this place. He immediately showed respect and greeted the master. In response, the man carelessly threw the child towards the boy. He felt dizzy and couldn't believe that this Chinese just threw him like a ball. The boy grabbed it and felt an unreal flow of energy in his hands. He looked inside the diaper and saw a tiny baby there. The master said that he did not have a student, so he decided to act like this. He laughed and asked not to worry about it. Teaching experience will come with time, the main thing is desire and discipline. He ordered him to make this child his student and teach him what he himself was able to do. But the boy obviously didn't like it. He didn't understand what they were talking about. He didn't want to be a student. Martial arts do not allow marriage. And even meet with someone. It really infuriated him. He didn't want to learn martial arts here for the rest of his life. With all his appearance he showed his displeasure and hoped that it would somehow influence their decision. And so this guy took the baby to his home near the library. He bought it and changed it into real samurai clothes. He prepared food for him while the child lay on the bed and rested. He was called Gonshin, but he didn't like the name very much. And he really didn't want to become a martial arts master. The boy also didn't really like the food they were cooking here. But he had no choice and he could not starve. Therefore, he had to eat the porridge that was given to him. The guy took great care of him as if he were his own son. Therefore, he wanted him to eat well and become very strong in the future. For now, he ate like a little bird. And before every spoonful of porridge, he hoped to survive. He didn't like their kitchen so much. This porridge really looked very strange, as if flour had been mixed with water. He scooped porridge into a spoon and cooled it so that the baby would not burn. It seemed to him that this man was a good enough person. He wanted to somehow avoid this bullying and not eat porridge. That's why he started screaming and crying. The men did not understand what he did not like. He thought that maybe his diaper was full. The boy would not refuse the opportunity to be able to speak and say everything that bothers him. But his diaper was dry and the men thought that maybe he wanted to sleep. The boy was not a child, but he could not say that. He did not want to sleep, but simply wanted to return to his past life. The man was very worried about the child's behavior and could not do anything about it. He did not understand what was the reason for his crying. The sun was beginning to set and evening was coming. The baby continued to cry and almost did not stop. Night approached. All living things went to sleep and the boy also seemed to calm down. No matter what he tried to say, only crying and shouting came out of him. The men spent the whole night on a chair and held the boy in his arms to calm him down. It was already very late, but they had to train on schedule. The men left him on the bed, and got up himself and walked away from the child. The kid did not understand what he needed to do so that he could speak and say about everything he did not like. He himself was already nervous about his crying, but he can't do anything about it. It was very difficult for him. Meanwhile, the man was meditating on the floor near the baby's bed. He really seemed to have moved to another dimension and did not react to stimuli at all. Was he really meditating? The boy was shocked that after his terrible behavior he found the strength to restore balance between body and mind. The man played some sounds that were incomprehensible to ordinary people. A powerful aura formed around him, which helped him become stronger. The only thing that could be heard from him was inhalation and exhalation. This happened for a long time. Only inhalation and exhalation. His head seemed not to belong to him and was completely disconnected. Meanwhile, the boy was also engulfed by this aura and closed his eyes. Now they meditated together and seemed to merge into one. And then the man heard the first word from the baby. It was the word uncle. At first he did not understand what had happened. The boy was very happy that he had progressed and would soon be able to speak. The man was also happy and asked the baby to say at least one more word for him. At first he was just breathing, and then something changed in his body. The man came closer to him. The kid understood that this was the effect of energy on his body. It turns out that the strength of that Chinese also lay in his energy. The boy concentrated and wanted to try again to say at least one word. The man also stood waiting next to him. But this time the kid just couldn't do it. As if some force was preventing him. No matter how hard he tried, nothing came out. Again, only incomprehensible sounds and screams. The man thought that it just occurred to him. Because it is too early for him to speak. He thought he needed more practice and more attempts to speak. The morning came. The sky was blue and clear. Various birds sat on the trees near the house where the boy and his husband lived and sang their songs. After some time, they flew away again to their families in the nests. The boy himself tried to use the energy to speak again. He decided to start by trying to roll over and at least somehow control his body. Energy training allows you to grow faster. If he continues at this pace, he will be able to grow much faster. But where did he get these incomprehensible thoughts from? A day ago he was a happy student who went on a date with his girlfriend, and now he is lying in a diaper and cannot talk. His head was very heavy and he would not be able to roll back onto his back. Because he couldn't lift his head, he couldn't breathe normally. And to gather energy in order to continue to develop and speak sooner. There was a knock on the door of the house. It was a man who came back to check how his baby was doing. He saw that the boy was lying on his stomach and could not breathe normally. He quickly ran up and did not understand how this could happen. The man grabbed the child and lifted him up so that he could breathe well. He took him in his arms and asked what he was doing here. He must have noticed last time how the man was meditating and decided to repeat after him. He began to look at the kid, but he did not look like a genius. With such intelligence, he could easily become a scientist and teach other children various sciences and techniques. The man was very happy that he had this baby. Snow fell overnight, although the man was already hoping for spring. 2 years later, a lot has changed. And it's time to find out what happened to the baby. He was walking on the street and found a stone nearby, which he decided to take with him. He became much more mature. The boy carefully examined this stone as if it were some kind of valuable object. He was interested in absolutely everything that was around. He transferred his energy into the stone. In general, thanks to this power, he could do various things. For example, he could simply break this stone into a bunch of small pieces with the help of energy. Once a man saw this and immediately ran to the boy. He managed to see that the stone he took in his hand was only ashes. He was shocked as much as possible. The man did not expect that his firstborn would have such amazing strength before the age of 5. The men began to run very quickly to Gongchen. The boy did not understand what had happened. The man pushed himself off the ground and jumped to reach the child faster. The kid was very frightened by this. At first he thought that he might have done some harm and now he wants to punish him. But in fact, when the men saw that first the boy took the stone in his hand, and then he disappeared somewhere, he thought that the child had swallowed it. Therefore, he flew up and began to demand to show him his hands. But it turned out that the stone in his hand turned into sand. Now the man understood this, but warned the boy that neither stone nor sand should be taken in the mouth. He decided that it was better not to say what energy he used for this. The man took him in his arms and they started walking home. And so the moment came when Gongchen turned 7 years old. He has already mastered some techniques and my energy control is much better than it was 4 years ago. He was very good on his feet and very agile for his age. He could also move energy from one part of the body to another. Thanks to this, he controlled his body and soul. His skills seemed phenomenal for a boy who was only 7 years old. He did not believe that this was happening in reality. The energy moved behind the body. This was called sharpening, about which his adoptive father spoke so much. While he was training, a teacher came out of the house to see him. He said that he had to go to the temple the next day. He was already 7 years old, so it was time to start full-time education. The boy was surprised. He had already told him that in order to find the right path, you need to take care of your people. The boy thought that he meant begging for the glory of Buddha. He will give him a sword and send him to wander. The boy heard that beggars cannot die or be injured. Therefore, he sent him to the land of the Conum clan. There he will be able to see the world. It is dangerous for him to be alone. Therefore, he should become a better master. But the only thing that bothered him was that they could not marry because of their status. But in their Conum clan you can marry, and he could not worry about that. The boy was satisfied. This was the only reason why he did not want to become a master in some clan. And so he finally arrived at the location of the Conum clan. It was a beautiful, new building. But the boy was not attracted to it at all. He silently entered the middle. He started training early enough, so he already qualified for the 4th degree in terms of training. Although the age difference will still be noticeable. While he was thinking about how he would behave in the team, which would be much older than him, a girl was heading to the boy. She was very beautiful. And since Gonshin was an adult boy at heart, he liked her very much. With every step she took, the boy felt anxiety inside his whole body. She spoke to him first and asked if he was the same newcomer. But the boy couldn't get a word out of him, so she tried to ask again if his name was Gonshin. Over time, he relaxed and said that it was him. Then he politely greeted her and asked how she knew his name. The girl replied that she was sent to pick him up. The guy was embarrassed and thought that it would be interesting enough here. She suggested that he start training. They approached the main building of their clan. The girl entered her and after a while threw Gonshin a fighting stick. He grabbed it, but he didn't understand what it was and how to use it. Because he didn't use weapons at home. He trained only with the power of energy and control. The girl said that now they would train and try to recreate a real duel. She also drew a circle that will serve as borders. It was immediately noticeable that this girl was not simple and definitely possessed many techniques. The boy couldn't answer because to him it was just a regular old stick. The girl was serious and attacked the boy. She hit him hard and tore his clothes. He thought it was just training, not a beating. He knew how to fight because of his training, but he couldn't block her blows at all. She did not pay attention to the boy's reaction and continued to attack. But during one of the attacks, she noticed something unusual. Gonshin was trembling all over, closed his eyes and waited for a blow from the girl. She stopped at the last moment and said that he did not have basic knowledge at all. He replied that he was participating in a real battle for the first time. But he should at least know how to block basic attacks. The boy stood still and carefully watched as the girl showed him various techniques for protection. She was very skilled with this stick. It couldn't even be considered a real weapon. He continued to watch carefully and tried to remember her every step. Gonshin asked the girl to demonstrate again because he didn't have time to understand some of the techniques. She agreed, although she understood that he still wouldn't be able to repeat them now. She began to twirl the stick so that it was not even visible in the air. The boy carefully observed and stored this knowledge in his head. To use them at the right moment and protect yourself or your loved ones. She gave the staff maximum energy. And again she decided to attack Gonshin to find out if he understood at least something. But she aimed her blow at the ground, not at the boy. And now he was sure that he would be able to defend himself against such blows. He adjusted himself and got into a fighting position. Then he asked the girl to attack him again and test his skills. She was very surprised by such persistence and effort. Although she was sure that he wouldn't succeed, she agreed and also got into a fighting stance. Literally one moment after the start of the battle, she rose into the sky imperceptibly for the boy. This was necessary in order to distract him from the very moment of impact. And now she was already attacking the guy with her stick. But this time he took the full force of the blow on himself and his staff. Gonshin was able to parry this attack and counterattack. With the help of his dexterity, he got closer to the enemy. And when the distance allowed, he attacked the girl. He learned very quickly and memorized everything that the girl showed him. Although he did not understand the meaning of the style itself. After he dodged, he needed to attack. But for some reason the boy stopped and his stick lost its power and speed before the impact. The girl asked what he was doing and why he stopped. He replied that he froze before he had time to think about anything. Therefore, he did not have time to think about how he should attack better. This guy was like a genius. The movements were not very refined, but the head understood and remembered everything. He gathered his strength and invited the girl to continue their training. She agreed because she saw great potential in him. They spent a lot of time in the training arena. The sun has already begun to hide behind the clouds and set. It was night, but the moon illuminated the area like the sun. After 2 years of study, the boy acquired amazing abilities. One day the girl decided to check what he is capable of now. And she attacked him by surprise to test his dexterity and reaction. The essence of martial arts was a battle between two minds. He asked the girl if she knew that the distance and methods of attacks were limited. After the girl made her attack, she jumped back to prepare another strike. After a while, she offered to block one of her punches. She accelerated from the beginning of the arena and wanted to confuse Gonshin. She planned a very clever attack for him. Looking at the boy, one could think that he was confused and did not know how to act in this situation. The girl performed several rotations around the axis in front of him. And she delivered a devastating blow that should have knocked out the boy. But he dodged in time and quickly changed his position. She thought he was just lucky to avoid this attack. Meanwhile, he was already behind. But he didn't have time to attack when he himself began to receive a lot of kicks. But with the help of his shield, he blocked absolutely all blows. The girl was not going to stop, so she sped up and swung her fist with all her might. But Gonshin again blocked her strike without any problem. He continued to do this every time the girl attacked him. None of her shots hit the target, despite the fact that she was forced to spend her stamina on them. She was shocked that his shield could block all of her blows. The girl asked how he managed to do it. The guy answered that this technique was from the old style. It is ideal in close combat, if you alternately use the 2nd, 6th, and 9th forms. She did not understand how it is possible to combine the 6th and 9th forms. The boy replied that for this it is necessary to use a new style. Only everything in symbiosis can bring such a result. He began to show her how to achieve this. First you need to move the energy from the upper point of the sternum to the lower one. He blinded the girl with his energy because there was so much light coming from him. He believed that it was directly related to the old style, although he is still not sure. The new style was quite intrusive, although the process should be continuous. The girl was shocked and could not say a single word. Now a boy who was only 9 years old stood in front of her and said such things that even she did not know. In 2 years, he learned a lot from her. It was time to show how much he had grown. But all his attacks were similar to each other. But the point was how he defended himself. He liked to do it to upset the enemy when they failed to carry out their attack. The girl very quickly changed her battle plan. And she began to behave in a completely different way. To use a combination of different techniques. She used skills that Gonshin had never seen before. But he was sure that he could easily defend himself from a kick. This time luck was on her side and the blow was very powerful. That she was able to break through his defenses and cause damage. Gonshin couldn't believe it because he was defending himself perfectly. He asked how she managed to break through the defenses. The girl replied that she used air dominance. He studied all her attacks and how to defend against them. And she possessed space. And she was capable of more extraordinary attacks. Simply put, he couldn't defend himself because he just learned everything. Gonshin was in despair because he thought he was stronger than the teacher. But that was wrong and very arrogant. She encouraged him and asked him not to lose heart. He had only 9 years of experience, while she had 19 behind her shoulders. She smiled at him and let him know that this was just the beginning of his training. The boy immediately cheered up and began to smile. It was unexpected. He asked to wait so that he could think for a while and come back. Gonshin ran headlong outside the clan territory. The girl asked him to wait, but it made no sense because he was determined. The girl thought about his skills and how he quickly learns new things. Although she was using a new technique, he managed to set up a barrier. He was definitely an unusual child. Every day, the girl became more and more convinced that this was a real genius. Gonshin spent a lot of time in the library. When he wasn't training or sleeping, he was among books. The boy sat on the floor and looked for the information he needed while the candle was burning. And finally he found the technique of domination in the air. He began to study it. There were 7 rules for successful learning. Gongchen was very tired and decided to postpone this book for later. He closed it and lay down on the floor. A whole year has already passed. He trained diligently all year and did nothing but practice. He studied new techniques and methods of protection together with the girl. From the very beginning, he was losing well, but now everything was completely different. He could block his teacher's blows and hit them back. Although before, the main number of blows penetrated his defense without any problems. He learned a lot of new information and was lucky to have such a mind and memory. In the last training session, Gongchen fully practiced his defense techniques. At the age of 9, he could compete even with his teacher, although things did not always go according to his plan. He needs to be taught to adapt to different types of attacks and combinations. Because perfect knowledge of theory does not always help in practice. You often have to improvise so as not to become prey for the enemy. He still has enough time to master various methods and techniques, so that the boy could perform at the world level in the future. Another training day with the teacher came to an end. Then he was defeated by a girl. She said that today was a very good training. But he was still powerless against a fighter who used air energy. He was sure that this was definitely not his maximum. Gongchen continued to lie on the floor and go through his thoughts. The candles were almost burnt out, he needed to go rest. He liked to spend time with books. And now the last candle has already burned out. After a few minutes, it completely went out. In the old style, there was a way to relieve tension. You just need to focus on your energy. And fill the inner bowl with it to the very edges. Gongchen dozed off in the library as soon as the candle went out. He smelled the wax in front of him. And because of this, he immediately woke up. During his sleep, a wonderful thought occurred to him. Gongchen understood how he would be able to use the air domination technique. The next day at training, he immediately told the teacher that he learned this technique. But the girl did not believe that a boy who was not even 10 years old could master this skill. If he was so sure, she asked him to demonstrate it in practice. He agreed without any scruples and was ready for a duel. He began to use energy to activate the ability. But the girl said that it was a different technique. He combined the power of the earth's currents with the old style. It was difficult for him to explain it in words, so he decided to demonstrate it better. Then the girl decided to check how similar their techniques were. She rushed into battle without any adjustments. And attacked the boy while he was trying to activate his new skill. Her hand trembled as soon as it touched his shield. She could not break through it and reach the boy. The girl continued to attack him, but all attempts were unsuccessful. All this was observed by a master who found this little boy during a fire in a nearby town. Even then he understood that the boy survived not by chance. It was a demonstration of the existence of fate. Chun raised a good student. The girl was angry and could not come to terms with the fact that this defense could not be penetrated in any way. This went on for quite a long time, but to no avail. She decided to try another technique, and for this she jumped above the ground. The girl was sure that this blow should destroy the boy's defenses. She threw a punch that was considered one of her strongest skills. She was happy because this barrier disappeared. But the boy was smiling because he cleaned it himself. In order to calmly attack the teacher thanks to the energy he managed to gather during this time. With a powerful blow, he threw the girl away and left no chance of victory. He exceeded all her expectations. She definitely did not expect such an ending. She had only one method left in her inventory. She activated her earth sync ability. The ground beneath her feet was destroyed due to the strong concentration of energy. She wanted to force him to open his defenses. Therefore, the girl decided to call a big tiger to help. She attacked him with her new technique. She even managed to break through Gongchen's defenses a bit. But he continued to keep the defense very coherent and efficient. The master watched this battle, sitting on a branch of a tree near the arena. He was surprised at how the boy manages to concentrate energy so confidently and direct it in the right direction. The boy began to smile, because he understood that the teacher was not getting anything and her plan did not work. She was shocked, because it greatly undermined her reputation as a professional. She only managed to get part of her hand through the guy's shield, but he used it to his advantage. After he had defended himself from her blows and the girl had lost most of her stamina, Gonshin gathered his accumulated strength and struck back. The girl was disoriented, so the advantage was on the boy's side. He gave her a fatal kick and thus confirmed his dominance. This attack after coming out of defense turned out to be very powerful indeed. The teacher fell to the ground. She was completely defeated. He then said that the basis of her technique was different, but the form was somehow still similar. She could not get up. The girl asked how he manages to do this at the age of 9. The guy replied that it would be very difficult to explain in terms and ordinary words. This day was one of the most important in Gonshin's life. After this victory and complete superiority over his teacher, he had to move on. His adoptive father took him and they went to the elder together. The boy asked the teacher why the elder called them to him. The men replied that it was expected because he had made their whole school famous with his abilities at such an early age. You might think that Gonshin is pretending that he doesn't understand this. But he was actually so interested in the various techniques and the training process itself that he didn't even think that he was doing anything useful. While they were talking, the road passed quickly enough and they reached the elder's house. There they were met by his assistant and they greeted each other. He informed the master that Chun and his apprentice Gonshin had arrived. He ordered them to go inside. The master welcomed them to his home. He often had the opportunity to communicate with Chun. But he communicated with Gonshin for the first time. Disciple Gonshin greeted the elder. He asked Chun to leave the two of them alone with the boy because he wanted to talk to him in person. He knew that he was wondering what he had been summoned for. The boy replied that he thought about it all the way to his house. The master was told that he was very dignified and a young man mature beyond his years. He summoned him to test his strength. But first he had to ask something. The master asked him what the energy foundation was. The boy was silent for a few minutes to collect his thoughts. And he said that in his understanding this is the only big connection, which is also called a separate type of energy concentration. It is able to connect consciousness with the surrounding world, forming a continuous flow of energy. The master asked how he connects it with the outside world. The boy replied that maybe he even makes him a part of this world. He feels it when the energy moves between his hands. The elder could not believe that this was happening to this boy. The galaxy is polite and eternal. It protects everything living and dead. At the end, any energy flows into its huge slow flow. This was the knowledge that the master was looking for all his conscious life. The day was approaching its logical end. The full moon shone in the sky. Meanwhile, the master meditated and used energy to support his body. The teacher came to him and began to greet him. The elder saw that the boy helped this man well. He advised him to also meet him and listen to his opinion. They both turned in one direction. Gonshin had already fallen asleep in the new place quickly enough. He wanted to leave him his last instructions. His hand approached the boy's body and began to emit powerful energy. At one point there was so much of it that the light from it covered almost half of the forest. All the animals began to hide and run away into the depths of the forest. Leaves began to fall from the trees. The master was unable to handle his energy, so he had to pack it away. When the time comes to remove this seal, he will have to correctly guide the boy to the true path. Because this child was the future of their clan. And his time has already come to an end. He has given enough strength and energy to maintain this clan. But nothing is eternal and every life ends at some point. After a while, there were already a lot of young children practicing in their clan's arena. And they were watched by Gonshin. Everything happened as the master had ordered. He went down to the children to point out their mistakes. The boy was already an adult and it was difficult to call him a child. His powers had greatly increased since he visited the elder. Gonshin at the age of 16 had a very strong body and a height of 180 centimeters. He began to train with the children and show them his new abilities. His power has increased several times since he defeated the girl. He could use a thread of chi that would spin the sword and increase its attack. Every day he reread new literature, which helped him to put it into practice. He also showed off his chi shield, which was much more advanced than before. Finally, the trees blossomed and real spring came. Petals fell to the ground and created an unusual atmosphere around the garden. But when they hit Ganchen's shield, they turned into ashes. The children were shocked by such skills and started clapping at the teacher. He promised that if everyone works as conscientiously, they will be able to reach even greater heights. While Ganchen was talking to the wards, the assistant said that they wanted to see him at the Temple of External Affairs. But he didn't understand why, because he didn't seem to have done anything. The Temple of External Affairs was nearby. The boy appeared there on their order. He went in and greeted the masters. He was invited to come in. The elder said that there was an urgent matter. But there is no one who could handle him and fulfill all his requests. The boy did not understand what was being said. He said that Chun already knew everything, so the master replied that the boy could go now. Ganchen had even more questions. Because no one had warned him about a possible business trip and some task. He needed to meet with the team and help them deal with the mountain bandits. The master announced his task and wished him a happy journey and a successful battle. Ganchen didn't say another word, just accepted the task and thanked him for his trust. He did not understand what he should do and how to act in such a situation. The boy went on a campaign at the request of the elders. This was his first task where he had to participate in the battle. He had already covered a long enough way, so he thought it was worth stopping for a short rest. Also, the boy is already hungry. As soon as the conversation starts about China, he immediately remembers their goodies and signature dishes. It was time for a snack, so he started to go downstairs. He went into the nearest town and there were a lot of people going about their business. He had never been in such crowded places, so he was embarrassed. And it smelled delicious there, and now his stomach will be happy. He hadn't been here for so long that he had already forgotten this beautiful aroma. This was what it meant to be a lone samurai. Always being away from civilization to concentrate on training. He needed to find a place where he could spend the night for one day. The guy decided to stop one man and ask him a few questions to get to know the area better. This man responded to Ganchen's request and recognized him. He realized that this boy was a master from Mount Conum. He was very happy to welcome the boy to their city. The man was ready to help with any questions. He had only one question. He needed a place to sleep for one night. The man replied that he knew where to find it and would gladly show it to him. He began to draw a path for the boy in the sand, how to get to the lodging. Ganchen thanked the good man for the detailed explanation. In return, he wished the boy a good trip. When the men left, the boy realized that craftsmen in this city are highly respected. Since he was told how to get to the lodging, the boy went in search. Although it would be better to eat first, but he decided to go to sleep. To get there before sunset. And so he arrived at the place. The third-generation student Ganchen greeted his brothers. He was met by 3 brothers at the entrance to the building. They did not expect to see him in this city, but they were glad to welcome him here. Ganchen immediately paid attention to one of the students. He was told that he was small, but it turned out that it was not a joke. His name was Van, but he is referred to as a swift sword. They were told that one terrible brother was expelled from the clan and a new talented one was taken in his place. The student asked if they were talking about Ganchen. The situation was clear to them, and they had to go to Sakchen. There was a unit that was responsible for transportation and security. Their goal was to clear those places of robbers who robbed innocent and defenseless people. The guy asked if they knew anything about these hooligans. The brother replied that it was a good question and they would discuss it on the way, so as not to waste extra time. The matter was urgent and they could not delay any longer. The building in which the detachment was located was already visible on the horizon. The boys reached him quickly enough and immediately rushed to the entrance. The chief in this detachment was called Hensi. While they were figuring out where to leave the horses, the manager was already running out to them. He introduced himself to Hensi and said he was the main local leader. They approached him and greeted each other. The manager asked if they had any problems on the way to him and maybe they had some requests. They also introduced Master Ganchen, who arrived with them to help clear the city of hooligans. The leader was shocked because he did not expect to meet a third-generation student here. This was the same Gonshin about whom there were many rumors and conversations not only in their city, but also far beyond. Hence he asked to wait a little while they prepare their rooms. He also asked what was the reason for such an unexpected arrival. But then the manager himself began to guess what they were here for. His brother confirmed his guesses. Night came. Horses grazed near the house while their owners rested and gained strength. The manager said that he heard the conversations of the vagrants. They said that robbers were behind it. But they needed to find out who it was before attacking. Hence he replied that they suspected my lordship. For some reason, Gonshin was very disturbed by such information and began to visibly worry. It was very serious. My brother admitted that they might not be able to cope without help. But Gonshin believed that the Moist were not strong enough to be feared. It was explained to him because he did not understand. That being mine is already a feat. He didn't want to belittle his fighting school, but it was true. But even the most skilled disciple of their clan will not be able to compare with my 16th generation. All the brothers were as focused as possible because this was a worthy enemy and could not be underestimated. They say that there were only 2 such warriors among them in the whole world. The guy listened to everyone's opinion, but did not believe that they were so dangerous and invincible. Heavenly Horse Majin and Blood King Sakchin, those were their names. If he asked how strong they were. Several decades ago. One of them, without any help, went against the 100,000 Mongolian army on his own. And another cut the throat of their Khan in front of thousands of people. After that battle, no one was left alive except them. Thanks to their victories, they received such surnames. No one doubted their strength, but would they be able to stand up to them? Because they were students of the old style and there are only 7 generations in their school. They won't even have a few warriors who can match them. They hoped that now Gonshin would understand the seriousness of the situation. They concluded that they would visit Hamun tomorrow. And if they wanted to solve this problem themselves, they needed to hurry. The elder brother said that now they need to rest and prepare for a tough battle. Everyone agreed with him. There was a full moon in the sky again and no cloud could overshadow its majesty. The robbers gathered for a meeting. Although they said that the newcomer was weak. But a tiger is a tiger. One of them asked how they would proceed. He was told that they should retreat. The other outlaw listened to everyone, but said that their tactics worked in the end. A man from the Conum clan began hunting them. It was a 3rd-generation Gonshin disciple and 3 swords from the provincial temples. The only question left was whether they would be able to destroy them. The chairman ordered them not to deviate from the plan and to move according to the strategy. But he did not order, but recommended everything. The final decision should still be made by them. They were determined and wanted to destroy them for rudeness and then quietly retreat. They have already made it clear to everyone who they are. Finally, you can play. But what was their main goal for this task? The main target is Gonshin. They agreed on the details and found a compromise. They wanted to destroy every hypocrite in this world and make each of them pay for their sins. The morning came. The boys spent the night in the house of the local leader. Gonshin didn't want to get out of bed because he knew what a difficult road was ahead of them. But he was still in complete control of his actions and burst out of bed. His thoughts were about whether it is worth getting into it at all. Is it necessary at all? Such strong opponents were too much for the first mission. But he couldn't do anything because it was his job. Someone knocked on his room. He said that the elder brother was at Hamun, but it seems that he has already returned. The boy went outside and met the brothers there. They asked him to join them and discuss everything. They waited for the last brother to return and gathered around a small table. A brother who went scouting said that they left no traces at all. They acted suddenly and decisively enough that the boys thought they had just run away. But the fact was that the elder brother did not believe in it. During the reconnaissance, he did not even manage to track her location. Their task was to return her. But how can they do it? They sold it. And they have no choice but to buy it again. But they were only interested in where the package they were looking for was now. She was on the west coast. So today they were there to sell. The power of the nobles was truly secret and powerful. But because of this incident, many of them disappeared, so the province will be quiet for a while. But why do these moists destroy everything around if they want to get something? The elder brother announced the end of the meeting. They will leave tomorrow. He also asked to send a letter to the main temple so that they take certain measures. Everyone agreed and was ready for this task. The boys were about to leave, but the younger brother called Gongchen. He suggested that he drink strong tea or something stronger if he had some free time. In the past life he had a good drink with his friends, but in this life it will be the first time for him. They took a good drink and decided to have a snack. It was Gongchen's first time to drink so much, so he decided to start small. The younger brother tried to make fun of him and said that even though he was taller than him, he couldn't drink. But the younger brother could not even imagine how much time he had spent on meditation. He had no time for such nonsense. But his companion at the table did not think it was nonsense. He was already in good enough condition and called him very sharp. Gongchen admitted this and added that everyone in the main temple knew about it. He didn't even have time to prove his point, as the younger brother already fell face down into the plate. He completely shut down. Gongchen didn't expect the day to end like this. The moon has been full in the sky for several days in a row. But this time the clouds were able to close it at least half. One of the robbers stood on the hill and watched what was happening between the boys. He was a scout for his clan. Gongchen had to carry his younger brother because he couldn't walk on his own. The boy could not afford to leave his brother in such a state to his own devices. While they were walking home, there was movement in the bushes. Then someone started running on the roof of the house near which the boys were walking. Gongchen began to suspect that they were being watched and were trying to trap them. As it turned out, they fell into a trap. Someone wanted to restrict his movements so that he could not escape. A man appeared in front of him and asked if he was the third-generation student of Gongchen from the Conum clan. Even at this moment, the smile did not disappear from the boy's face. It was a robber. He chased them from the cafe itself, where they drank alcohol and had dinner. No one could outsmart Gongchen yet, so he had to teach this guy and teach him good manners. But the younger brother was an extra burden. Therefore, he threw him aside while he dealt with this robber. Gongchen had long wanted to use his new technique against a real enemy. Therefore, he began to accumulate energy for his defense, which he can then turn into a surprise attack. The robber did not expect the boy to resist at all. And so the robber's first attack failed. He could not break through the shield. And as a result, he simply flew away from him for several meters. But it only made them angrier. They planned to deal with him very quickly. It might seem to him that they attacked for no reason. But it did not bother them at all, because they never followed moral values. The guy considered it an unfair fight. It is very mean of them to attack each other. But he had no other option but to repel their attacks. They were sure that it would be very easy to destroy this guy. But when they got closer to him, they realized that their plan was failing. The robbers felt that something was happening to their weapons. The closer they were to Gongchen, the more this feeling appeared. As a result, she simply destroyed herself. This guy was on a completely different level than the outlaws knew. Therefore, they did not cause him any problems. He was able to destroy two robbers who wanted to kill him with one powerful blow. They continued to lie motionless on the ground and were completely powerless. They only managed to scare Gongchen a little, nothing more. What they had only hoped for before attacking the boy. Now he needed to get his younger brother home. Gongchen came up to him and it seems he was not well at all. As Gongchen approached his brother he saw something. Around the neck of one of the robbers was a shuriken, which was used to finish him off. And then the boy realized that there was someone else besides them. He was killed so that he could not tell anything. You could die at the hands of your brothers only in this place. Only their clan allows themselves to treat their loved ones like this. When the boy returned home, everyone began to analyze this aggressive attack. The elder brother said that he exceeded all their expectations. They had no idea that he possessed such destructive power. But they still asked him to be careful. There was a very powerful energy here. It will be very difficult to survive. And the boy understood this perfectly. The younger brother was also told to be more careful. And you shouldn't drink so much on the job. His life could depend on it. The boy apologized. While the older brother was talking to the boys, the other called him over and asked him to look at it. After a detailed examination of the body, he noticed something. It had a strong poison that spread through the body. The moists use it to kill their brothers after a failed mission. Therefore, it must have been them. It was necessary to immediately report what had happened to the main temple. But it was still unknown why they attacked Gonshin. He was sure that his life was in danger and he needed to be much more careful. After all, it was not by chance that he was sent on this particular task together with them. They tried to inform the main temple very quickly. The elder brother said that he would contact Hamun and the guard in the meantime. Several days passed. It was not possible to follow the tracks of the robbers. But rumors about their appearance spread very quickly around the city. At the same time, the talented Master Gonshin became an equally interesting topic for discussion. And now it was time to say goodbye. The boy had to return home to his clan. He learned a lot from his brothers and was grateful for it. But the brothers admitted that they did not have time to teach him something worthy. They wished him a good journey and that he overcome it without obstacles. The boys hoped that they would meet again in the near future. He, in turn, thanked them for their support and wishes. Gonshin went home. The boys could be calm for him because his power was really unique. Although they didn't see even half of his abilities. The boy was upset. Everyone was returning to the main temple. The enemies disappeared without a trace, and he needed to return to training and practices again. He hoped that he could study a little with the brothers of another school to gain new experience. When he reached the center of the city, the boy stopped. He needed to decide where he would go next. Mudney was far enough away, but somehow his soul wanted to go there. It got dark outside very quickly. Gonshin had to move through the forest. All the animals went to sleep except the owl. It was a very dense forest and it was not easy to get through it. But he knew that the forest must end soon. And so the boy reached a clean clearing where there were no bushes or trees. This was supposed to be the beginning of the city. He was already thinking about how he would eat hot soup with rice and then rest in a soft bed. But then he noticed that it was not the end of the forest and there were thick trees everywhere around him. He was probably lost. When Gonshin realized this, he began to unpack his backpack. He took a lot of things with him for a snack. Because he really liked to eat. A boy could go camping without extra clothes, but he should always have a bag of rice with him. He also brought a wok with him for cooking noodles. But he could not find the flint. Did he forget the most important thing? He used to be a big fan of barbecue. The guy was ready to recall his old skills. He found a small stick and started making fire. He had been trying to start a fire for about half an hour, but it was all in vain. The stick spun very quickly, but to no avail. Gonshin realized that he was not cut out for this kind of work. The waiters were better at it and he began to blame everything on the stick. Then he sat down and began to think that he was doing something wrong like that waiter. How to make him have a fire and cook his favorite barbecue? In theory, friction should generate heat, and it should turn into flame. And then he decided to try to add energy to the friction, maybe this way he would be able to do it faster. He began to accumulate energy and direct it to the stick. The boy did it carefully so as not to overdo it and burn the entire forest. He concentrated the energy in his hands and directed it downwards. After some time, he had spiral energy. That is, it was possible to do without wood and extra sticks. He grabbed the dry leaves that were lying on the ground and threw it into the place of condensation of energy. This helped him to light a big fire, which could help him prepare dinner. Although it is not an internal flame that can heal the body, it does not need a flint. The boy could finally cook the long-awaited rice. Gonshin wandered for a very long time. Day after day passed very long. He needed something to eat because his supplies had long since run out. On the 10th day, he went to the hill and hoped to find a village nearby. He was all dirty and tired. His body was very hungry. From the hill he could see how vast the Chinese land was. And then his eyes saw something. A hare was running on the hill. The boy had only one thought, that he should be caught. He tried not to frighten him and stood still so that the hare would come closer. He, in turn, also watched the boy and probably guessed what he was planning. Before Ganchen's eyes, he imagined a nicely baked rabbit with a side dish and vegetables. He ran sharply after him and hoped to finally eat. But the hare turned out to be very clever and evaded all the boy's attempts to catch him. But Ganchen couldn't let him escape. It was his last hope and he jumped as high as he could. And as a result, he was able to catch him with the help of his persistence. But he did not notice that there was an abyss in front of them. And the boy with the hare in his hands fell down. It was high enough there and they fell into the middle of a dense forest. They landed successfully enough and Ganchen managed to keep his prey. All that remained was to light a fire. The boy lifted his ears to see which parts of his body were the most fleshy. But when he saw his eyes, the hare fascinated him. Now he could not kill him. He was very sad to take the life of such a cute creature. Moreover, it was not his fault that Ganchen got lost. Therefore, the boy decided to let him go. As soon as the hare felt freedom, it immediately disappeared from view among the trees and bushes. The boy hoped that the next stranger who caught him would also take pity and let him go. Ganchen heard the cries of a cow, which meant that the village was somewhere nearby. But he needed to determine where the sound was coming from. From the west or the east. He was waiting for the cows to start screaming again so he wouldn't be mistaken. And after another signal, he accurately determined that the village was in the east. And he began to run quickly in this direction. And the boy was not mistaken, because after a certain distance there really was a village there. He went into the first dining room he came across. Ganchen ordered a lot of food. 5 portions of roast beef and the same amount of boiled chicken and several more portions of dumplings. He stuffed his stomach completely. Now the boy looked like a bullet. He ate everything very quickly and the owners started to worry. The guy was sitting at the table all dirty, but happy. His clothes and shoes were dirty and torn. And then the waiter approached him and began to address him in a not very friendly tone. Because she suspected that the boy would not be able to pay for such a large dinner. But he replied that he would pay for all the food they prepared for him without any problems. Moreover, everything was very tasty. He put his hand in his pocket because he always kept his money. But his money bag was not there. The boy was confused. He must have lost it when he was catching up with the hare. Then the cook came to his table and asked what he was going to pay for. It was impossible to allow the master to be associated with a rice thief. He made innocent eyes and asked if they do all the work at night. The man showed his muscles and asked him not to speak with his teeth. But the woman stopped him because she had an idea. The guy stayed to work in this canteen and started drawing mascots. He asked to put it under the pillow at home and by the next night her son would be much stronger. They invented it together with the owner of the restaurant to attract the attention of customers. Many people immediately reacted and became interested in talismans. And for those who order dumplings in the dining room, he is ready to give a very good discount. In the Jangnam clan, he learned to read and mastered Chinese medicine. He also learned how to lure luck. Of course, no one could know how true this was. But it was definitely clear that this way it became much easier for people to solve their problems. He talked about how to avoid evil spirits and what good deed should be done. For example, help him. He successfully worked off the food he ate in this dining room. So he needed to continue his journey. Meanwhile, there were new problems in the main temple. The ambassador of the Shaolin Temple came to visit them. To tell firsthand about the trouble that covered their city. Everyone who was present at this meeting was silent. They lowered their heads and listened to the teachings of the ambassador. Their fault was that they ignored the words of the main temple. He demanded that they not be silent, but start justifying their foolish actions. One of the masters said that the ambassador was exaggerating and allowing himself too much. Because they had no evidence to vote for. The ambassador became very aggressive and said that people were being killed in front of his eyes, and they needed some more evidence. He became so angry that his energy began to emanate from his limbs. But it was too late. They started to act. But the main problem was something else. They guessed that he was talking about representatives of the 3 outer sects. It was said that not only moists appeared. Together with them, the Temple of the Sun, the Ice Palace and the Trinity of the Southern Gates began to operate. The only thing known about the Temple of the Sun was that it was the main sect of the desert. They practiced resistance to high temperatures. The Ice Palace is located in the north and studies the combat techniques of snow and ice. And the Trinity of the Southern Gate is a poisonous gate. The Gate of the Beasts is the name of those who divided the power over the eastern lands. Each of them wants to get the province of Sichuan. Therefore, the representatives of the gate endlessly fight with each other. But they were also interested in the question of who was their leader. But the ambassador considered it a stupid question that was out of time. He was the ambassador plenipotentiary, so he had to answer every question. The ambassador recommended choosing Namguna. The glory of the Sword King spoke for itself. It was truly an outstanding master. Sword King Namgun. There was no one who could compare with him. Unless the ambassador, but he himself put forward the proposal of the king. At the moment, there are 4 strongest ones. They are Dan Chongi, Namgun, and Galsan. And Umangu was considered one of them. One of them refused. It made no sense for him to try to be the leader at his age. He suggested choosing younger people. Galsan went on a campaign and disappeared. In that case, no one objected to such a decision. But it was also important to hear the father's opinion. The ambassador asked Namgun what he thought about their choice. He replied that it was a great honor for him. But he cannot refuse and is ready to take the post of leader with respect. Thus, the members of the ancient association Murim chose the King of Swords as their leader. Meanwhile, the sect of thieves felt that difficult times were approaching, and created their own organization in response. Gonshin, meanwhile, continued his long journey after so many years of training. He thought that he needed to earn a little more, but he spent it all. But he bought a new uniform. Because the old one didn't even look like clothes. And it was comfortable to move in this one. You always need to train in a comfortable way to fully feel the energy. His only negative was that no one taught him to overcome the feeling of hunger. He stopped again to have a delicious dinner and prepare for the next day. The next day he planned to reach the nearest village. He tasted meat porridge with dried meat. One could only wish for the best. During dinner, the boy heard strange sounds near his camp. He didn't like someone interrupting his delicious meal, but he had to check to see if there was any danger nearby.